And as promised, it's time for the county conversations. Commissioner French and Commissioner Ozias are here today with their guests. We've got Annie Fricker, and I keep saying Annie. I just like Annie rather than Ann. I just prefer Annie. Annie Fricker and Eli Owens. And welcome to both of you and to the commissioners. And what's our main topic today that you guys are here to speak about?
Thanks so much for having us. We are here to talk about the community cleanups that we've been doing throughout the community in 2023. Oh, sorry about that. We're here to talk about the community cleanups we've done in 2023 in Clallam County and how successful they've been, and the hopes of getting on board to do some more.
Okay, so first of all, your titles and department.
I am a code enforcement officer for Clallam County Department of Community Development, and the sub-department is code enforcement.
I'm Eli Owens. I'm with environmental health, and so I focus on solid waste.
Okay, solid waste. And yes, we've had a lot of solid waste blowing around last week. That wind came up and knocked all the trash cans over. I was feeling sorry for the guys from Murray's Disposal picking things up. And and just what is the community cleanup consist of?
So what we started doing last year was finding a neighborhood where we're getting a lot of complaints coming into our department and kind of reaching out to the whole neighborhood around and offering to bring out a dumpster, and the neighborhood can come out and fill it up with all of their solid waste. And it's an issue that we see quite often coming up as a complaint. People are saying, oh, all of this trash around is bringing in rodents and it's unsightly to the neighbors. And so we say, okay, well, let's get everybody on board and let's all help out. So we first started out in Port Angeles on Myrtle Street and Vinup, and we were able to get about 18 tons out of Myrtle Street and Vinup area. And then because that was successful, we decided to take off to Clallam Way and Forks. And there at the corner of Clallam Way, we canvassed about a mile and just going out and handing people some flyers that said, hey, we're doing a community cleanup and we love for to have everybody's involvement, whether it's a property that we had a complaint about or not. And there we got rid of, I think, another almost 20 tons. And then our next one, this one was actually on one parcel out in Clallam Bay. We got 49.63 tons off of one property out in Clallam Bay.
I wonder if the more rural the area, the more stuff collects in the backyard.
I think it's part that, and it's part, just not having such access to a dump as we have here in Sequim and Port Angeles and in Forks, without having one out there in Clallam Bay. I think a lot of the things kind of get collected instead of being able to be driven to the dumps. So this is
stuff that's not picked up on the weekly trash pickup.
Yeah.
Just sort of accumulates over time in the yards and stuff. And I know for years we've had like the alley cleanup here in Sequim that sort of had progressed beyond just cleaning up the alleys to doing more than that and stuff. And So how much have you got planned for 2024 then? Do you have some stuff coming up?
The hope for 2024 is that we'll start again in the spring, and we're hoping to do one every other month maybe, and go around and canvass a neighborhood that could really use our help, and get out there and say, hey, we're here to help you. We'll we'll help you get rid of your solid waste that's building up. And we also help get rid of junk vehicles as well. A lot of people don't realize that we can help get rid of those at no cost to them. And so if they've got a vehicle that's been abandoned on their property and it meets all of our criteria for a junk vehicle, then we can help get rid of that. So.
Right. Now, do you typically operate on a complaint basis for like non-emergency sort of code enforcement? And therefore, if you do enforcement on a single property, would you typically then look at adjacent properties that were visible in the same area so you're not selectively enforcing?
Yes. So what we have, our model is complaint driven, but we also are trying really hard to do compliance through education first. And so if we can get out there, and if we have one property that's really just got a lot of complaints on it, it's got a lot of solid waste buildup, a lot of junk vehicles, that kind of stuff, because they typically go together pretty often. Then if we see other things in the neighborhood, even though we don't have a complaint, we'll say, maybe this neighborhood would benefit from a community cleanup. And we'll say, we'll go to the roads department and say, where do you have a decent portion of the right of way where we could throw a dumpster and we could safely get rid of trash near this area? And then we'll go around and talk to everybody and just say, hey, we're here to help. It's not often that you hear, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. So
okay. And I'm kind of I did code enforcement for a long time, and I just kind of interested in your whole process. And do you have an infraction process? Or you?
We do, yeah. If we're unable to get compliance through education, and if somebody's really just unwilling, then we do have a process where we go further, and we will take them through a hearing examiner process.
You go to the hearing examiner first?
So we attempt compliance through education or voluntary compliance first. And if we can't get voluntary compliance, then that's when we move to the hearing examiner.
So no citation process first?
No, unfortunately
That's
not.
why I asked if you had an infraction
yet.
process.
Yeah.
So you're not sworn to issue a citation?
No.
Okay. All right. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, I can see where you'd be reluctant to have to take things directly up to I was always reluctant to have to take things up to issuing a misdemeanor and having to go to municipal court with things. That's why I found an infraction process very helpful.
Yes.
Very helpful.
It would be very helpful. Right now, we're part of the Department of Community Development, and so we are not commissioned at all. We're not commissioned through the Sheriff's Department or through the Commissioners to be able to write those tickets.
Right. I just did it through my planning department and stuff. So.
Okay.
All right. And Eli, you're back. We've had you here before.
This is actually my first time.
I thought we had you here before, but we've certainly talked about our septic system issues before. Now, how are we getting a lot of compliance now? I mean, it's been a couple of years since we've done sort of mandatory inspections.
So I'm actually garbage. So solid waste.
Just solid.
Garbage.
You're on the solid waste side.
Yeah.
So, is that where the dumpster's coming from? Is that we're coordinating with you on solid waste?
Right. So I'm with environmental health. I'm support for DCD's code enforcement for this program.
Now, the solid waste is, the sites are run by Port Angeles.
The transfer station.
Correct.
Correct.
And the dump out in 8th Street, or is it? Where's the dump in Port Angeles is?
That's the transfer station.
Transfer station.
I think of
Blue Mountain.
Blue Mountain transfer when I think of transfer. So you have to coordinate a lot with the city of Port Angeles then.
I'm a regulator, so I oversee their operations, but I don't do anything with their day-to-day operations.
Okay, and now the transfer station. So we have a transfer station out at the county dump site, and we'll say they basically compact it and put it in to haul it.
Correct.
And where's it being hauled to?
Eastern Washington.
Eastern Washington. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Eastern Washington. Okay. So a long haul out
Yeah.
there. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And but there's recycling going on at the transfer stations.
Yeah.
Right.
And glass just started to be recycled.
Okay. And who's getting the recycling then? Where does that go to?
Republic is the hauler, and so they haul it to Seattle for recycling.
Okay, not as far. Okay, so it's helpful. But we don't do any curbside recycling in the county?
Yeah, we do.
We do?
City of
Okay.
Sequim has recycling, and then City PA has recycling.
Okay.
But it's not glass.
Not glass, okay. But I understand glass is now being taken at the Blue Mountain site where
Correct.
it wasn't before.
Yeah.
Okay. So helpful if they can get that out of the solid waste stream, if you get all that recycled
a lot of
material
weight.
out. Right, yes, a lot of weight saves some money on the transportation.
Yeah.
Okay. And so your bosses are here across the way. Kind of your direct boss isn't here, Ann, but the county commissioners are here as well. And when we came to funding these community cleanups, how did that go around? Who brought the idea to you guys?
So it's actually, I think that the budget exists in Annie's department for this. And so this is something where for code enforcement to work well at the county level, we have to have a lot of departments working together. And
Right.
when we don't, it doesn't go well. Our community suffers. And so I believe it was early last year, we had a long conversation at the board level with Bruce, the director of community development, Bruce Emery. And the suggestion was, let's get all the departments to come to the table, sign an agreement, and say, this is how we're going to work together. And that included code enforcement at DCD. That included environmental health with solid waste. That included the prosecuting attorney's office. That included the sheriff and the board of commissioners.
And road department?
I'm not sure. If
A lot of times I had issues because stuff would spill out into the right-of-ways and, those sort of things.
Well, and so I think the catch-all is the board of commissioners,
Yeah.
where the road department falls under us. And so
Right.
if any department that we have the direct authority over is needed to be involved, I'm sure we can send the email, we can make the phone call, and we'll get good support. But with all those people at the table, we're able to take on some of these more complex cleanups, like the Clallam Bay one that was mentioned, where we really needed code enforcement at DCD. We really needed solid waste to come up with the plan, to work with the community. The sheriff's office ended up being extremely important for that cleanup because there was some things that were happening on that location that were not necessarily safe.
Right.
And we can't just send Annie out with a letter, knocking on the door saying, okay, it's time to clean up. That's not, safe for her to do. And so all the departments working together, you heard the result was 49 tons of solid waste. I think it was 86 junk vehicles removed from one site. So obviously what that person had done was kind of created their own little
Junkyard,
salvage yard. And there were not productive things happening there.
Right.
And it was really, if you go and look at the map of Clallam Bay, it's a block away from their school. It's right there kind of near the center of town.
Now, one of the things, in my experience, you get from one of those type of operations is soil contamination.
And that's where, again, Eli comes in really crucial.
That's where Eli would be involved because you've got, oil leaking and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of times they would just drain the oil out onto the ground and, those sort of things.
And that was a site, I think, where Eli's participation was really important because he can have the threat of fines that Annie necessarily doesn't have right at her fingertips. And so having the departments work together means that a cleanup was able to happen.
And sometimes the residences on site themselves are potentially not habitable. So you might even have the building department involved with red tagging, something like that.
And I'm sure Annie has, those contacts at her fingertips as well, working in that same
And that's one way to get
umbrella.
some compliance is if you have a little, bat behind your back, a little threat overhanging things.
And I think that's actually a good segue into one of the other important parts of that conversation we had at the board level last year was we recognize that in a lot of these situations, poverty is an element, mental health is an element of when problem properties occur. And so we can't just be cold-hearted and throw people out into homelessness. We have to work with them, try to bring them the resources so that, again, getting that education and compliance voluntarily can be a lot more practical in those cases. And that's something where with the community cleanups, I think that's such a great way to go because it is very practical. They got tons of solid waste out of neighborhoods without sending a bunch of letters, threatening fines, going to a hearing examiner process, something that might have taken a long time, been very litigious, and might not have gotten the same result. And it's a very proactive strategy as well, where we're just going out and saying, okay, this is an issue. We've had these complaints. Of course, it's all complaint driven. What can we do to solve it as good public servants? And so that's where I think that was such a cool bit of work that I wanted to make sure we highlighted.
It's 4:23 in the afternoon here, Friday, January the 19th, 2024. Rich Hendrickson here. We're in the middle of County Conversations. Commissioner Ozias, Commissioner French, and their guests are here. And we left it off because the code enforcement process in Clallam County goes up the ranks to the hearings examiner, and we'll talk about that because some folks may not be familiar with what a hearings examiner is. And of course, a lot of times you hear them maybe only dealing with land use issues or something else like that. But so we've got a hearings examiner dealing with a little more day-to-day stuff here with that. So exactly where does the hearings examiner sit in the Clallam County process?
Well, as Ann indicated, the hearings examiner would be the next level of escalation in a code enforcement endeavor if there's not voluntary compliance and no response to sternly worded letters and all of those steps. Mm-hmm. And we have tended to like the hearings examiner process because it gives an independent eye on the entire case. It allows the county resident, if they're interested, to try and make their case and present their situation so that it can be heard fairly and completely, and there can be a defensible record that comes out of that hearings examiner case. Of course, the county does also use a hearings examiner for some land use issues as well, and that's a tool that has been overall, I think, pretty effective for us in Clallam County.
Are we using the same hearings examiner for both types of issues?
Yes, we have. We're in the process of looking for a new hearings examiner. I don't think we found one yet, have we?
I think there's a conversation on our next agenda actually about that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's something that we're anxious to find a new hearings examiner. We had a hearings examiner who did both of those types of hearings for us for the last number of years, and for some reason was not able to continue doing that. So we're looking forward to finding a new one and getting back on track.
Now, typically a hearings examiner is an attorney, licensed attorney. Doesn't have to be, but is typically so. And sometimes you can write your codes where they're almost a last resort kind of thing as an administrative tool before it has to go up to the elected, like city council or the board of commissioners. It's an alternative to doing that. So have you kind of looked at how much activity the hearings examiner is getting and seeing if there's other opportunities to do administrative reviews at a lower level, like maybe having the planning commission approve some things? Or
Yeah, that is something that we're always thinking about what's the right scope of work, and this is just my opinion, but I suspect that one of the reasons that Clallam County makes such heavy use of the hearings examiner in the way we do is because of the unique nature of having an elected director of community development. The commissioners, for example, in every other county are in essence the lead land use officials at an elected level, and so have a much higher level of familiarity with a lot of the detail that in our county, that expertise resides in the director of community development. And so I think having that dynamic really has encouraged us over the course of time to make a heavy use of a hearings examiner.
Right, yeah, because typically in a lot of cases where you don't have a hearings examiner, the administrative process would take you up to the elected body as the last piece of administrative relief before you get to court.
Right.
So I can see where you have this other elective layer in between here. Yeah.
And it if you think about it, it doesn't make a great deal of sense for the Board of Commissioners, for example, to sit in a quasi-judicial capacity when we don't have the expertise in the subject matter.
Oh, I thought you were all knowing. No, okay. I know you're learning. Okay. Now you spoke about your next agenda items coming up. Any other agenda items that might be of interest to her? And also we could talk about how people can be, number one, made aware of what's on the agenda and how they could maybe attend the meetings either personally or remotely.
Yeah, so we meet every Monday for what we call a work session at 9 o'clock in the courthouse. And we also make a virtual option, which we have found that works very well for a rural county that is a pretty big geographic area. As people on the east end and the central on the west end, it is difficult to say show up at the courthouse at 9 a.m. on a Monday and get good participation without that virtual option. So we've been very lucky with that. And then we also meet for our regular meetings at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Our next actual work session, we do have actually a report from our Director of Community Development on the code enforcement system. And it gives us, one of the things that we talked about when we made that agreement was we want to actually follow this from a data perspective. We don't want to just hear, oh, it's going great. I think it's great to talk about community cleanups. I think it's great to talk about the proactive ways we're trying to, interact with our community and bring our standards up in those situations. But it's better also to talk about what is your caseload? How many cases are coming in? How many cases are resolving in a positive, way? And so we actually have a review from our code enforcement team and our elected DCD director, Bruce Emery, where they're coming to the board and just giving us that data, giving us a little bit of a presentation so we can kind of track our efforts. And I'm our hope is that we'll keep doing that every year and, to keep good care on that oversight.
Right. I've seen that perhaps in an area, a more rural area that's transitioning, having more population move in, getting a little denser in certain areas, some things that may have existed for a long time that were potentially nuisances but weren't because they were so isolated. As new development happens around here, all of a sudden the new folks say, wait a minute, what's going on here? And some of it may be things that they're complaining about that is allowed. The farmer's spraying his stuff here and we don't like it. Well, that's farmland. But there's other uses that may be happening out there. So, Ann, on besides the like property maintenance kind of things, what other kind of code enforcement issues may be sort of a top of the list, like non-allowed uses on a particular property? I understand that we're reviewing the accessory uses to the agricultural zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. We are in the midst of reviewing that currently. One of those driving factors in that is actually kind of backyard campgrounds, if that makes sense. Hip camp is getting really big in our area, and it's wonderful that we want all of these people to come to our community, but we need to make sure that they're doing it safely. And safety really is the number one priority, and also protecting the rights of not only the property owner, but the rights of the neighboring property owners, and so there are areas, like in the UGA, we've got like a very low density zone, a VLD zone, and, those zones, you can't have a campground there. It's a prohibited use, and it likely will never allow a campground. But, in an R5 zone, where it's rural land and it's closer to, Clallam Bay and Forks and Salt Creek and all of those areas where we all love to recreate.
But those that would be a typical use that would be allowed in a rural area through a use permit process, right?
Yes.
So, but you're talking about ones that are just
right. So
non-permitted.
Yes, in the agricultural areas, especially kind of like out by Jamestown, that kind of area. It's a nice agricultural area, and they'd like to share that with people that want to check out our area. And so if we can do that through updating this code, then I think it really will go well for everyone. It'll bring in tourists. It'll even have locals going out and spending their weekends at these local farms, and, maybe they want to go out and visit the cows and chickens and whatnot that are out there, and they'll be able to do that as long as they do it through the right process, and that way they keep them safe.
And do you ever have to work with state agencies as well on some of these enforcements? Because I've run across just the thing that you're talking about, where people have decided to maybe relocate stream beds and make nice little water features in their campgrounds and had to get the Department of Ecology in from Olympia.
Yep, we are not only utilizing as many resources as we can out of our county, but we also are trying to get with. We use the State Patrol quite often. I have a very good relationship with two wonderful people from the State Patrol that I can call anytime, and one of them's even in Kennewick, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is who you need to talk to," and Department of Ecology, Department of Revenue. We've utilized them quite a few times
right.
in trying to figure out things about properties and corporations,
right, and tax reporting and
yes,
revenue, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, we utilize quite a few different entities that you wouldn't typically think code enforcement would need to utilize, but it all helps us get to the
Now,
same
lately, stories in city of Port Angeles where they had a moratorium on what they're calling short-term rental units, basically, Airbnbs, bed and breakfast.
point. Yeah.
Now, most communities or agencies would have a bed and breakfast ordinance where you define what a bed and breakfast is. Most of them would require the owner to be on site, limit the number of rooms, require additional parking, all those kinds of things. And of course, it's a commercial operation as opposed to renting out your house for more than 30 days,
Yeah.
because then it just becomes a residential rental.
Yeah.
But less than 30 days is commercial and has different fire code requirements and those kind of things. So what's the county's situation on these short-term rentals right now?
So we do actually have a vacation rental code, and it does involve things like letting people know when the quiet hours are, and letting people know what the safest route to escape is. Those things are required through our vacation rental code, which
And what
I hate
sort
to
of
be
things
wrong, but it could be Title 27 that addresses that.
and bringing a house up to commercial level?
So what we do for a vacation rental is we require a fire life safety inspection. And a fire life safety inspection really, what it does is it basically makes sure that, there's not big old patches of drywall missing, and that, you've got running water and you've got a water heater.
Hardwired smoke alarms.
Yes. Yep.
Carbon dioxide
Connected.
alarms.
Yep. All of those things that typically you would see in like a final inspection on a new construction.
Okay.
It's those little finishing touches that make sure that the community
And is this
safe.
limited to 30 days or less for rental?
I'm not positive. I'm not sure on that answer, but it is for specifically for vacation rentals.
Because your room tax will cut off after 30 days.
Yeah, and I think one really important thing for the public to understand in this is a lot of the problems that the city of Port Angeles ran into was because they didn't have a requirement for a permit or an inspection. Mm-hmm. And so they had, a zone-based approved or not approved, or not permitted format. But Clallam County requiring that inspection, I think, gives you a lot more of the ability to enforce the standards. And that's something that, as policymakers, it's something that you learn early is whatever your good idea for a policy might be, can it be enforced is one of the most important questions, because if it can't, then the situation that we put our code enforcement officers in is just really not good. But if it's something that we can make sure that it's easy to enforce, it's easy to get that compliance, we can actually create standards that the community will respect and follow. Whether it's, on the agriculture accessory uses or on the camping uses or on short-term rentals. I think our community has some preferences. We want to hear those preferences. We want to make policy that respects them. And especially as you know, we're going through, in the next 2 years, we're going through a comprehensive planning process.
Right.
That's our opportunity to create those levels. But if we can't enforce the codes that we make, what's the point?
Right, yeah. And on the ag accessory uses, I've noticed that we might have limited requirements for the agricultural stands on the roadside stands, as far as, and that's of course working with the road department as far as safe ingress and egress and turnaround and those kind of things. I have noticed limited improvements in that area for some of these stands, and whether they're permitted and whether they received approval. So there's a lot to do. And again, it really kind of goes back to a changing environment in a rural area. Things that really weren't a problem before become a problem. 2 in the afternoon, you're tuned to KSQM, your commercial-free, listener-supported community radio for Friday, January the 19th. We're in the middle of County Conversations, and Commissioner Ozias and Commissioner French are here. But we have been seeing the evolution of the Towne Road design and resolution. And the last we had heard, the ultimate design was the 2-lane with the pedestrian walkway on the side that's going up. And just to go back, of course, the moving of Towne Road resulted from moving the levee back to allow the stream to meet its natural meander and slow down erosion and allow more fish passage and those sort of things. So where are we right now in that status?
So we're hoping that this overall project will be kind of wrapping up. We're in the stage of kind of final design on that road system that is going to live on top of the levee. And there was, it's one of those things that the more you learn, the more interesting it gets, at least to me. Because one of the things that was limiting us was, the way the levee is shaped, that makes that top somewhat narrow.
Right.
And so it's hard to fit everything you want. If you want a nice pedestrian path, you want to make sure traffic can go both ways. You're kind of limited by how narrow it is at the top of the levee. So one of the first steps that our county roads folks did was a survey to figure out how much the levee in that, how long has it been since it was constructed, I'm not sure, how much it's settled.
Subsidence.
Because as it settles, you actually get maybe a little more room to play with at the top, where you can cut some down and get a little bit more.
Right, and
width.
you always need to allow time for compaction before you put a road in. Right?
Absolutely, and so we've had a little bit of time for it to settle. We had I was actually out on the levee that last week of last year and that last week of December, and I saw the people out there surveying. So the survey work was done. The survey report came into our public works. They were able to kind of get their bearings on where we think we can be. The next step is then to take that data, give it to some of our consultants that we're working with, and come up with the final road design. And we assume that that's going to take maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 at the most. That report will come back where we'll get a good understanding of what's the actual design documents for construction will look like. Our county engineer is going to have to review them, make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And then the next step for that will be that document will allow us to do the cost estimation that we need to do to make sure that we have the budget available, because that was always kind of the question mark of if we have to do the, depending on what level of infrastructure needs to go in to make it safe, our current budget might not be able to meet that need. And so they've gotten some creative ideas in there, both with hopefully the settling will give us more room so we won't have to do anything fancy on the top. They're going to, instead of having a normal crown on the road where water will flow both directions, we really don't want water from the roadway flowing into the floodplain, right? Into the river. That's kind of the whole point. And so they're going to just have it only flow away.
Okay.
And that will actually probably produce some cost savings as well. And then one of the other ideas was using our in-house chip sealer folks to do the pavement. We'll see if that's needed. Those kind of decisions are still up in the air, but the basic plan right now is get those consultants to do the work. Then we can actually do the cost estimation, make sure that we're within the budget that we need to be, and then hopefully put it out to bid. I believe he was saying late February, early March. If I think
Sounds
that was
about
correct.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the interim, Towne Road is closed off through traffic. How far from the south going north can people travel on that now?
The one direction I was able to drive all the way up to the creamery.
To the creamery, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you're coming in from Anderson, you can pull in by the schoolhouse,
By the
and there's a little
schoolhouse.
parking lot there, but then there's the access gate that's there that evidently was not a crash gate or did not have a Knox box on it, from what I understand. But
Correct.
yeah, so
And that's an interim step that I think people are looking at to see, is there a solution that we can let emergency vehicles drive on the levee if they needed to?
yeah, typically a Knox box is one where the fire department would have key access to open a gate
Right.
through a box there. But that's
And there's other electronic ones that they can.
now
how
there's
they-
electronic
yeah.
ones or simple crash gate where it's sealed but not very tightly. You could just bumper hit it and it opens up.
And that's, I think, one of the other issues is, how much money do you want to spend on gates in the meantime if we're hoping to get a solution this summer? So it's a tricky thing.
That's where the Knox box is typically the cheapest
Yes.
one. Okay.
And the other point that I want to make is, overall, in my mind, that project, it's a beautiful success, right? We have this beautiful river that's able to go back to its original floodplain. We're seeing a lot of we actually had a presentation from our weed control folks, and they were talking about all the new and interesting things that are happening in that area for the plantings that they're doing. I think that I was just reading that the project was nominated for it's the American, it's ACEC, American College of Engineering, I think, award. And there's going to be there's a lot of good things happening with that overall project. It's unfortunate that we've had a lot of these, deliberations about how does the road going to look. We're really just trying to put the cherry on top of what really was a great project.
Okay, great. Well, I'm sure my niece's husband, who works for ODOT, doing exactly that kind of stuff, would be interested in coming up and seeing the final result here. All right. Before we go, any other last minute items that's coming up here? Anne, you have something?
Yeah, I've got something. I wanted to let everybody know, beginning on February 6th of this year, our building, planning, code enforcement, public works, and environmental health will all be moving to an online permit system. This is much needed, and we are going to be closed in DCD as well as the roads crew that's there in the main counter area of the courthouse, and the environmental health crew that's in there will be fully closed for February 6th, 7th, and 8th, all day to the public so that we can work out any kinks that come about. We've been working on it 2 years now, and it's finally come to fruition, so it's really exciting for us. And it'll be really exciting to help our community because we can start accepting permit applications online. So people that are far out on the west end or far out on the east end are not going to have to come to Central Port Angeles to be able to turn in a permit in person. So there is going to be a public seminar introducing the new system and how to use it on February 2nd from noon to 2 in the Board of Commissioners meeting room, right there in our courthouse across from our DCD counter. It's going to go over record searching, creating an account, submitting code complaints, traffic sign maintenance, the My Civic 311 app, which is all new with this program, applying for a permit or submitting your plans, requesting inspections and payments even. So it's an exciting new portion of DCD that we're hoping to share with the community. So.
Okay, well, thank you. And commissioners, your next meeting is
This coming Monday at 9 a.m.
this coming Monday, and folks could attend in person or
virtually.
through the county website.
ClallamCountyWA.gov.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to, Eli, Ann, thank you so much for coming in. Commissioners, we will see you again next month. I think we have
Thank you.
a subject for next month. We need to get the whole year calendar set again. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, here we go.
Thanks.